The sun rose slowly over the endless plains, casting a golden light across the rugged landscape. Dust swirled in the morning breeze as Jackson Hale rode his horse along the old winding trail. He was a tall, strong man with a rugged face that told the story of years spent on the frontier. His eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the horizon for signs of opportunity. Life on the trail had been hard and work was scarce. He had traveled for weeks, searching for a place to settle, even if only for a little while. As he rounded a bend, Jackson spotted a small, dusty town in the distance. A wooden sign creaked in the wind, reading, "Dry Creek, a place for work and hope." Jackson slowed his horse and studied the main street. Wooden buildings lined the dirt road, leaning slightly under the weight of time. Smoke drifted lazily from chimneys, and the faint sounds of daily life reached his ears. A hammer striking metal in the blacksmith's forge, a broom brushing steps outside the general store, and the low chatter of townsfolk beginning their day. Tying his horse to a post, Jackson walked along the street, the boards of the sidewalks groaning under his boots. At the edge of the town, a small office held a notice board with several postings. One particular note caught his attention. It read that the town was seeking a strong and honest man to help at the local orphanage. Jackson felt a flicker of hope. The frontier was full of hard work, but this opportunity promised purpose and stability. Inside the office, Jackson met Mayor Thompson, a wiry man with a nervous energy about him. His clothes were plain, but his eyes carried determination. "You're here about the job?" the mayor asked. Jackson nodded, and Thompson explained the work. The orphanage was in need of someone dependable to help with repairs, chores, and caring for the children. Jackson listened carefully. It was not glamorous work, and it promised little money, but it offered something he had long missed: meaning. By evening, Jackson rode to the orphanage, a modest building perched at the edge of town, surrounded by a fence and wild grass. The caretaker, Miss Clara, greeted him warmly. Her face was kind but tired. She explained that the orphanage ran on a tight budget, relying on volunteers and the small contributions from townsfolk. The children needed guidance, protection, and someone reliable to help with the daily tasks of frontier life. Jackson felt a quiet resolve growing inside him. This was work he could do, and he was determined to do it well. The children peeked out from behind doors and windows, curious about the new man in their midst. There were 6 of them, ranging in age from 5 to 12. Each child had a quiet story behind their shy eyes. Jackson noticed the smallest ones clinging together, while the older children watched with cautious interest. He approached them gently, introducing himself with a calm, steady voice. Slowly, their curiosity overcame their shyness, and small smiles began to appear. The following days were filled with hard work. Jackson repaired broken fences, painted walls, tended the garden, and carried water from the nearby well. He taught the children simple lessons in reading and math, and even shared stories from his own travels. Though the work was tiring, Jackson found a sense of fulfillment he had not experienced in years. He began to understand the rhythm of life in Dry Creek, the delicate balance between hard labor and moments of joy. The town itself was quiet but alive with small signs of life. On his trips to the general store, Jackson met townsfolk who greeted him politely. Some were curious, others cautious, but gradually they began to accept him as part of the community. He learned small details about their lives: the blacksmith struggling to keep his forge running, the storekeeper's worry about incoming shipments, the farmer whose cattle had been lost to drought. Jackson listened, offered help when he could, and began to feel a connection to this remote place. One afternoon, while walking near the edge of the forest that bordered the town, Jackson noticed unusual footprints in the dirt. They were not from animals, nor did they match any common pattern of travelers or townsfolk. They seemed deliberate, almost as if someone had been pacing, studying the land. Jackson felt a twinge of unease. The frontier was dangerous, he knew, and even in quiet towns there could be hidden threats. He made a mental note to remain alert, but he said nothing, not wanting to alarm Miss Clara or the children unnecessarily. Night fell, and the orphanage was quiet except for the soft breathing of the sleeping children. Jackson sat by the fire in the small kitchen, listening to the crackling flames. Miss Clara joined him, and they spoke softly about the town's history. She told stories of settlers who had arrived decades ago, struggling against harsh winters and dry summers, of families who had built homes from nothing, and of men and women who had risked everything to protect the weak. Jackson felt a deep respect for these pioneers and a sense of pride in joining their legacy. The children began to grow comfortable around Jackson. In the mornings, they would run to greet him, tugging at his coat or showing him drawings they had made. They asked him to teach them new things, and Jackson found joy in their curiosity and laughter. They asked endless questions, from the simple, "Where does the sun go at night?" to the curious, "Have you ever seen a real bear?" Jackson answered them patiently, weaving his answers with stories of his own adventures and the lessons he had learned. Despite the calm, Jackson could not shake the feeling that something was off. The footprints near the forest seemed to appear again and again, as if someone had been walking the same paths repeatedly. At night, he sometimes thought he heard soft rustling beyond the fences, or the snap of a twig where no animal should be. Yet life went on in Dry Creek. The townsfolk carried on their routines, and Miss Clara reassured him that frontier towns often had such sounds, nothing more than wind and wildlife. Jackson remained cautious but continued his work, determined not to let fear interfere with his duties. One evening, a young boy named Timmy approached him. "Mr. Jackson, can we go to the creek?" he asked, eyes bright with excitement. Jackson agreed, leading the children to a small stream at the edge of town. The children ran barefoot along the bank, throwing small stones into the water, their laughter echoing through the quiet evening. Jackson watched them carefully, ensuring no one got hurt, but he also let himself enjoy the moment. These were simple joys, but they were precious, and Jackson felt a growing sense of responsibility and affection for the children. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jackson reflected on the journey that had brought him to Dry Creek. This remote town, once just a place on a map, had become a home in his heart. The work was demanding but meaningful. The children were innocent, full of hope despite their past hardships, and the town, though small and quiet, had a warmth and resilience that Jackson admired deeply. He realized that his journey was no longer about finding adventure or wealth. It was about protection, care, and making a difference where it mattered most. Yet he could not ignore the sense of unease creeping at the edges of his mind. There were mysteries to uncover, challenges to face, and dangers that might be closer than anyone realized. Jackson resolved to stay vigilant, to protect the children and the town, and to embrace whatever trials the frontier had in store. That night, he sat outside the orphanage watching the stars glimmer over the plains. The quiet was comforting, yet filled with unspoken possibilities. The children slept peacefully inside, unaware of the unseen shadows that sometimes lingered at the edge of their small world. Jackson felt a deep, quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had found a place where his strength, courage, and kindness could truly make a difference. And though he did not know what tomorrow would bring, he felt ready. The frontier was unpredictable, but Jackson Hale had found a purpose worth standing for, and he knew he would face whatever challenges came with unwavering determination. For now, the town of Dry Creek was safe, and under his watch the children would be cared for, the orphanage would be maintained, and a quiet hope would continue to grow on the western frontier. The sun was just beginning to rise over the vast open plains when Jackson Hale rode his horse along the dusty trail. He was a tall man, weathered by years on the frontier, with eyes sharp and steady like a hawk's. Jackson had traveled many miles chasing work and opportunity, but lately, jobs had been scarce. When he saw a notice nailed to a post outside a small, isolated town, he felt a flicker of hope. The town, called Dry Creek, was far from the nearest settlement, and it promised work for a strong, honest man willing to lend a hand. Jackson tied his horse at the edge of town and walked along the main street, noting the wooden buildings leaning slightly in the dry wind. The townsfolk were few, and most were going about their business quietly. A blacksmith hammered at his forge, sparks flying into the air while a woman swept the steps of the general store. Jackson's boots kicked up clouds of dust as he approached the town's small office where the job posting had originated. Inside, he met the town's mayor, a wiry man named Mr. Thompson, whose eyes betrayed a mix of worry and determination. "You're here about the job?" the mayor asked. Jackson nodded, and Mr. Thompson explained that the town needed a man to help maintain the small orphanage on the edge of town. It wasn't a dangerous job, but it required someone dependable, strong, and willing to face the challenges of frontier life. Jackson agreed. He had always enjoyed working with people, And though he wasn't used to children, there was something comforting about the idea of helping a small community thrive. That evening, he rode out to the orphanage, a modest wooden building surrounded by fences and wild grass. The caretaker, Miss Clara, greeted him with a warm smile. She explained that she ran the place with limited resources and could use help with repairs, tending the small garden and keeping the children safe and happy. The children were shy at first, watching Jackson with curious eyes from the windows. There were 6 of them, ranging in age from 5 to 12. Each child had a story, and Jackson quickly realized that many had faced hardships even younger than he could imagine. Still, their laughter and curiosity were infectious. Jackson felt a rare sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The following days were full of hard work. Jackson repaired broken fences, helped Miss Clara fetch water from the nearby well, and taught the children basic lessons in reading and math. He also rode into town occasionally to fetch supplies, exchanging greetings with townsfolk who seemed slowly to accept him as part of their small community. Life was simple, yet it had a rhythm and a warmth Jackson had not known he was missing. One afternoon, while walking along the edge of the forest near the orphanage, Jackson noticed unusual tracks in the dirt. They weren't animal tracks. They were footprints, oddly shaped and moving in patterns that suggested more than one person had passed through. He felt a twinge of unease. Dry Creek was quiet, but the frontier was never truly safe. Jackson made a mental note to watch the area carefully. That night, as Jackson sat by the fire in the orphanage's small kitchen, Miss Clara shared stories about the town's past. She spoke of families who had struggled against drought and disease, of men who had risked their lives to protect others, and of the strong sense of community that had helped Dry Creek survive when many other frontier towns had vanished. Jackson listened, fascinated by the history, and felt a deeper connection to the place. Days turned into weeks, and Jackson settled into a routine. The children grew fond of him, trusting him in ways they had not trusted many adults before. They would run to greet him each morning, eager to show him drawings or practice their reading aloud. Jackson often stayed late, helping them with lessons or telling stories of his own travels. Stories full of adventure, but always ending with lessons about honesty, courage, and kindness. Despite the calm, Jackson could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. The footprints he had seen near the forest seemed to appear more often, and there were nights when he thought he heard faint noises outside the orphanage. Still, no one in town seemed alarmed, and Miss Clara insisted it was probably just the wind or the animals. Jackson, however, remained vigilant. One evening, a young boy named Timmy tugged at Jackson's sleeve. "Mr. Jackson, can we go see the creek?" he asked. Jackson smiled and agreed, taking the children to a small stream that ran near the edge of town. The children laughed and played, tossing small stones into the water, their joy filling the quiet night. Jackson watched them, heart swelling with pride and affection. In that moment, he felt that protecting these children was not just a duty but a calling. As the sun set behind the hills, Jackson realized that Dry Creek had become more than a stop along a trail. It was a home, a place where he could make a real difference. He resolved to remain vigilant, to protect the children and help the town thrive, even if it meant facing unknown dangers. Little did he know, the town held secrets that would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. Shadows moved where light seemed safe, and whispers in the night hinted at mysteries that stretched beyond the simple life of frontier work. Jackson was about to learn that sometimes, the greatest adventure was not in seeking riches or fame, but in standing firm for what was right, even when the path was uncertain. The night closed in, and Jackson sat alone outside the orphanage staring at the stars. He could hear the gentle breathing of the children inside and felt a rare sense of peace. Yet the quiet was deceptive. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Jackson would need all his strength, courage, and wisdom to face them. But for now, he allowed himself a small, quiet moment of contentment. For the first time in many years, he felt that he truly belonged somewhere,